Hello, everyone. It's your host, Sophie, and welcome to Two Broads Talking Politics. I'm here with your co host, Kelly,
Hello, everybody.
and our very special guest, Marla Hexter, who is here to tell us about her experience in running for office. If you haven't guessed, that's the theme of our podcast today, running for office and how to do it. So, welcome, Marla.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about your background. Did you have experience in politics before you decided to run for office?
I did not, but I lived in the Washington, D.C. area for a long time, so I could say I was exposed to politics there. But no, my background was as a federal employee. I worked in a national security agency. That's kind of my background, but I was interested in politics, and I did work on the Hillary Clinton campaign last year. So that was kind of my introduction.
Cool. What did you do for the campaign?
I was the canvas captain for 3 areas here. And so for the GOTV, which stands for Get Out the Vote, if anyone who doesn't know that, it's the 2 weekends before the election. I was in charge of training canvassers and making sure people knew what they had to do, where they had to go, and that they kind of completed their tasks, and just kind of keeping people motivated.
And you're in Pennsylvania, correct?
That's correct. I'm in western Montgomery County, which is about one of the shoulder counties of Philadelphia.
What is the region like? What sorts of politics go on there? Is it a liberal area? Is it a conservative area?
A lot of Montgomery County is very liberal and very democratic, but the further west you get, the more conservative it gets. So the area I live in, a lot of it is very rural, and it's traditionally been very conservative and very Republican. So I had kind of an uphill battle during my campaign, and I knew that. So I was really excited that I was able to, kind of break through that barrier and have a Democrat win.
So tell us a little bit about why you decided to run for office. What was your thought process?
There wasn't really a lot of thought process. It's kind of a funny story. My husband's very involved in local politics, and he goes to the Democratic committee meetings locally. And he came home one evening, I think it must have been, I don't know, maybe early February. And he said, we're looking at candidates for the local offices. How would you like to run for supervisor? And I was like, it took me about 3 seconds. And I just said, okay. That was pretty much it.
So what is a supervisor? What does that mean?
Well, in Pennsylvania, we have this really interesting concept called the township. And as I understand, it started with William Penn. And it's just an area that can encompass multiple villages. So you either live in a township, which is where I live, which is made up of parts of 4 different villages, or you can live in a borough, which is a town or a city. So I live in a township, and it's called a second-class township, which means it's small, and you can have either 3 or 5 supervisors. So we have 3 supervisors, and I would be one of them. So the supervisors do everything that's involved in governing the township. They manage the police. We have a sewage plant. They take care of road repair, snow plowing, public safety, ordinances, all kinds of other rules and regulations that kind of run the township. And they collect, of course, a tax to pay for all of that.
Okay, and so it's sort of like a 3-person mayorship in a way?
Yeah, maybe like a town council, but the towns would have a mayor. So we don't have a mayor. We just have the supervisors. Okay. Yeah, that's correct. We also have a town manager who does the day-to-day running.
Okay. Yeah, I actually grew up in a township in Ohio, but it was set up differently. So there weren't like towns within the township. The township was just sort of the rural part that wasn't part of a city.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we had, I think they were called township trustees, and there were like 5 trustees instead of a mayor.
Okay. Yeah, Pennsylvania is very unique in a lot of ways. It's interesting. I'm learning a lot.
So how long before the election actually happened did you declare? How early did you have to declare yourself?
I think I declared in March. We had to get signatures. So my husband went around and he got most of the signatures for me. And then there was a primary in May. So I was unopposed in the primary. So my opponent knew that I was on the ballot. But our strategy was to keep a really low profile since there had never really been a Democrat here in, we don't know how long, but we think it may have even been as far back as the Civil War, but it's been a long time. It's just been a long time. So we really didn't want them to think I was running a serious professional campaign. So I went around and did my door knocking and talked to people, really tried to kind of keep a low profile.
Was your opponent an incumbent?
Yes.
And you said you had to get signatures. Is that all you had to do to get on the ballot? Was there anything else you had to do?
I had to be endorsed by the local Democratic Party, which was no problem since I was definitely a Democrat and a candidate. No, I say that because we've had people here trying to get in who change parties so they don't have to go through a primary. But and I actually had a couple of people asking me, "Are you really a Democrat? Or are you really a Republican? And you just switched?" And that just gives you an idea of how rare it is to have Dems here in office.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know anything about the registration, the voter registration of your town? Do people declare parties?
Yes, so 50% of the registered voters are Republicans and a third are Democrats. And the rest are independents or other.
So you were facing an uphill battle.
And the other challenging thing was not only had there not been a Democrat on the ballot for a long time, but because there hadn't been, a lot of Democrats and kind of liberal-leaning voters had gotten in the habit of they just weren't voting in these off-cycle elections because why should they go and vote? Who's on the ballot to vote for? So I had two things I had to do, which were challenges. I had to get more Dems and independents to go to the polls than normal. And I also had to get some Republicans to flip and vote for me. So those are my two things I had to accomplish to win.
Which one did you think was harder?
I think getting people to go out to vote was harder. It wasn't really that, I don't think it was really that hard to get a lot of Republicans to flip because we have a lot of moderate Republicans who live here, and they were used to government that was more responsive, that listened more, that were more in tune with the needs of the residents, even though they're Republicans. The three people who are in office now were not very well liked. And so there was, there were people out there really wanted to change. They wanted someone new. So when they met me, if they were Republicans, they would grill me. They'd ask me questions. And if they were satisfied with my answers and that I was, competent and experienced, and a lot of them said to me, well, I'm going to vote for you. But getting people to go out to vote who only vote in presidential elections, I think that was the bigger challenge.
So I'm wondering about your campaign. I'm really only familiar with the campaign structure of a large national sort of presidential campaign. What did your campaign look like? Did you run everything yourself? Did you have volunteers? What does that look like for you?
That's a good question because having worked on a big campaign, it was tiny, but our goal. So my husband was my campaign manager, and he was very experienced. He worked on a lot of campaigns in Virginia, everything from presidential campaigns to local mayor to state rep. So he was very experienced in running a campaign. And that was super helpful for me because I didn't have to focus on looking at the voter rolls and figuring out how to do targeting. He did all of that. So my job was to meet people and sell myself and build relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had a treasurer. We formed a PAC so we could do fundraising. So we had a treasurer, a friend of mine, who actually ended up running for an office herself. So she was my treasurer. And then I had a bunch of volunteers, but I didn't really use many of the volunteers until the very end, until the get out the vote period. So it was really just myself and my husband for most of the campaign. But I have to tell you something really interesting that happened. If I can get on a little bit of a tangent, but it kind of elaborates what you asked me. So I started knocking on doors in late March and learning about the issues. And around June, I would say early summer, I realized that the main issue in the township was development. So we're an area that has a lot of farms that are not farms anymore, but people have moved here to get out of the city, to enjoy the rural lifestyle, to raise children. We have a really good school district. So we have that. And people don't want to have a lot of development and have that ruined. So I realized that was a big issue. And then around midsummer, after I realized that was the big issue, which I was talking up when I talked to people, I came across a local citizens group that lived in an area where a new big development was going to take place. And so I found out they were running their own campaign to stop development, and they had a Facebook page about that. And then I found about another month later, I came across another citizens group in another part of the township that was also looking at a development that was ongoing and trying to make sure that they did that right and didn't ruin the neighborhood. So myself and these two other groups, at a certain point, we kind of intersected and combined. And I want to say joined forces, but what I realized was I could help support their issues and they could help support my campaign. And that was completely fortuitous that it just happened. And that was a huge support to me, because then when I got to getting people out to vote and putting out my yard signs, I drew on these two groups, which are in different parts of the township and represented different demographics. And they were huge support to me at the end and helping getting people out to vote. So that was just one of those kind of organic things that happened along the way that was kind of surprising, but also really helpful.
Yeah, that's really interesting. For the second part of this podcast, we'll be talking to someone who wrote a book on how to run for office. And that's very much the kind of thing she talks about. And so it sounds like something that you sort of came across without realizing, that it was something to go look for. But it's the kind of advice that is given, especially to women who are running for office. So that's fantastic that worked well for you.
Yeah, well, the main thing I learned here, and I can't speak for larger campaigns because I was not trying to get 50,000 votes. I was trying to get, in the hundreds and thousands. But you really have to get out and meet people. And for me, that was the most important thing. And that was something that my husband, my campaign manager, really pushed. You just got to get out every day. And let me tell you, when you're going out in the summer and it's the middle of the day on a Saturday and it's like 90 degrees and you're not talking going through apartment buildings or going through townhouses. You're going from house to house, and some of these houses are far apart, and you're walking down really long driveways, and it's hot, and you have to turn up at somebody's door and try to look fresh and try to look energetic, and try to hold on the conversation, and you're wiping the sweat off your face, and wondering what you look like when people open their door. And so that was tough, but that made all the difference, because at the end people said to me, like, wow, you came to my house, you talked to me, you took the time out and to listen to me and hear what I had to say. And that was what made the difference, is the personal contact and showing people that I was going to work hard and I was going to make that effort.
Did you find that difficult to do? That's one of the things that I would be not afraid of, but like nervous about in terms of running for office, is having that face-to-face contact with potential voters at their houses. Like, did you find that? I guess I'm just like a pretty shy person. Did you find that challenging at all?
Well, I will say you get better at it after you've done, 10 or 20 or 50 houses. But the first couple dozen doors I knocked on, it was challenging because you don't know who's going to answer the door. You don't know. You have to start a conversation with people. You have to say enough to tell them who you are, but not too much that you just sound like you're reading from a script. So I will say the first 10 or 20 I did were probably, practices, I would say. I mean, they weren't that great, but you get better at it. And the other thing I got really good at is telling from people's body language or expression. Is this going to be the 30 to 45 second blurb, or am I going to have 2 minutes with them? Or are they going to be chatting and invite me in and give me 10 minutes? And so that was really what I learned after a while, is how to read, from people, how much time I had with them. And then that allowed me to figure out, okay, if I only have 30 seconds with them, what do I need to tell them to get them to vote for me? What's the most important thing I need to leave them with? But I had people invite me in, offer me dinner, give me, tea, water. I had someone invite me in for a beer. I mean, some people really wanted to chat.